So in the spirit of being vulnerable, I decided I was going to talk about all the vulnerable stuff that I usually don't in front of a room full of people that I don't know. So really quick implementation of your learns. I'm Alex, I'm the marketing manager at Big Red, and I want you to do a thought experiment. Picture your most confusing employee. So maybe they're great at interviews, maybe they're a really good talker, maybe they're impressive and they're a self-starter. They're open, really open, maybe too much, but also really reserved sometimes, kind of catches you off guard. Maybe they've got lots of potential, bucket loads, especially in the interview stage. You think this one is a star, but they're late a lot. You're not sure if they take this seriously. They always seem to be feeling sick. Whether they'll let you know before calling off seems to be a bit of a gamble. You have a lot of one-to-ones, lots of new promises, accountability schemes, and they do seem to care. At least they say that they do. Might have even cried in their one-to-ones. Makes you feel awkward. Maybe you want to empathise with them. But then it's weeks and weeks of high-level performance followed by a handful of days where they're barely even checked in. They're not even there. What do you do with somebody like this? If you've had any kind of mental health training, you might start going down that route. How can we help you? What support do you need? Within reason. If you're close to someone who is depressed or has a complicated background or has any number of labels you might be aware of, you might know to take it one step further. Look, there's always ways that we can make this work for you. How about more flexible working? What's going on at home? But at some point, your favour's going to run out. At some point, you're going to feel maybe their potential isn't worth the cost to the business. So you start looking for ways to let them go. Is this a familiar narrative? If you look at it from the other side, it's my story. We're all here to think about neurodiversity and how you can effectively manage neurodivergent individuals, and I'm incredibly grateful to share a room with like-minded people. I really hope that you're going to walk away from here with a clear picture of what needs to be done. But it's not guaranteed to be simple or easy. I didn't know I was neurodivergent till I came across the concept last year. After a lifetime of self-hatred, incredibly poor coping mechanisms, and a constantly changing sense of self, I finally saw myself reflected in a definition. And during my journey of self-discovery, which started a long time ago, I've burnt bridges. I've really struggled to build trust in the workplace. I've job hopped just so I could get to feel like I'm the best version of me again. The impressive self-starter, at least for 6 months until the mask slips. So you might be asking, what changed for me? How am I here? I've stayed here at Big Red a lot longer than 6 months. How did they do it? I've got 4 points. This is the first workplace that I haven't been effectively punished for the way that my brain works. It's the first leadership team I've been able to build trust with. It's the first place I've been supported through my highs and my lows, and they were cavernous lows. And it's the first place that I felt safe to fail and pick stuff up and try again. Now you might think that applies to everybody, but it was very, very important for me, someone who'd had their trust eroded by pretty much every adult or authority figure in their life. Not all neurodivergent people are like me, but I think you'll see similarities, especially across other women with ADHD. If you've read the guide, you'll know there's an element at the end where I surveyed a lot of neurodivergent professionals. It shocked me how similar our lives were. It almost felt like I could have written the response. I would ask someone, you know, what's a negative experience you've had at work? And it was like I'd written it. And that was quite scary because I thought I was really unique and cool, but apparently I'm not. So particularly for those of us with ADHD, it's very hard to leave our personal lives at the door. We're all in or we're all out. It's a very black and white mindset. I mean, I've done a lot of therapy and learnt the grey area does exist, but it does not come naturally to me. We bring an intensity that I think either burns bright or it burns out completely. And we are typically very self-aware, so it makes us confusing to manage. Even with the best intentions, we can appear very black and white, passionate, but like apathetic sometimes. Maybe, yep, that sounds great, and things get stressful, and they just shut off. A social butterfly, as I say before, we shut off and we're reserved. I have spent evenings wallowing in anxiety because of a single social interaction in the office, and notwithstanding everyone in Big Red, I love them to bits, they're all great, but how my brain perceives that interaction is not something that they can control. I've spent days considering quitting my job because everything's so overwhelming, I just want to curl up and not exist for a while. I've cried at work, I've had panic attacks that Paul has very expertly managed by not saying very much and letting me panic. I felt like my life is falling apart because I got something wrong or I missed a deadline and I was late to something I tried so hard to be on time for. That sounds exhausting from your perspective. But one thing I always say is imagine being on this side of the brain. It's not fun. Trust me, we know exactly how we're perceived. We feel a deep, lingering sense of shame for never being able to achieve the potential that we're constantly told that we have. The P word has hung over my head my entire life. Went into school, did my 11 plus, very lucky, got a bursary. All through school, struggled, no support. But you've got so much potential. I hate it now. I can't stand the word. It can be very, very negative for some people, depending on their life and their experience. But last year, learning that I am just neurodivergent and I'm not innately broken or worthless or unfixable has completely changed my perception of self, and the team at Big Red will have seen it. I feel safe enough to tell Paul and Hayley, the disclosure element, and that has changed my life beyond the workplace. In the workplace, given my story, we started looking at ways to make work doable. So I do hyper-focus, Mark touched on that. Especially if something interests me, and the way I always describe it is I'm a dopamine chaser. Dopamine is that reward feeling, right? If I like something, I get dopamine from it. If you talk to me about IR35, I probably didn't hear any of it, to be honest. I'm trying really hard, but I'm probably looking at your face going, yeah, no interest in the conversation whatsoever. That's something I've got to overcome. So to make me comfortable in the face of, I also have sensory struggles. You know, I hyper-focus very deeply on something. I get into maybe, I won't go to the toilet, I won't eat, I won't look up from my desk for ages, and I'll get it done. I'll get probably 8 hours worth of work done in 2. But you can't just sustain that. That is not sustainable. So I always say I work at 200% and I need to rest at 200%. So we've got a concept called padding, which is before and after something I know is going to be energy intensive, I do something that's not. And I either deep breathing, go for a walk, in my case, go for a cigarette. I know it's bad, don't tell me, it's really bad, I'm going to quit at some point. But it gives me a sense of being able to leave the room, get out of that headspace and go back in and do the thing I need to do. Sometimes I have sensory struggles, so I look like I'm social. I haven't really spoken to a lot of you, apologies in advance, but I do struggle with that a lot. I struggle with noise and things being too bright, and the office sometimes I can go in, feel great, by the afternoon I'm like, I'm getting a headache, I don't know why, I can't hear anything, everything's so bright, it's so loud, it's so intense. So I go home, I work from home. I use the walk home to reset myself, I get back and I'm able to get back into a mindset where I can actually get stuff done. Another thing is ADHD, whether you know it or not, really affects sleep massively. I haven't been able to sleep since I was a baby. My mum reminds me of that periodically because I think it affected her slightly more than it did me when I was a newborn. But yeah, I've never slept well, didn't know why, started researching. As Amy says, I'm a complete science geek. ADHD and sleep deprivation are linked, because trying to turn off that brain that's wired like a motor, and you've got all this stuff going on, you've got sensory issues, especially if you're masking and you've come home from pretending to be what you think is normal, and you get home and it all just falls apart, you crash, but you're not tired, your brain is awake. So that's affected us. I had a conversation with Hayley about this, which was some mornings I weren't feeling that great and I was maybe saying, oh, I'm not feeling very well. And the reality was, how do you tell your boss, sorry, I can't come in because I'm too sleepy? It's not something that most of us are going to say. But me and Hayley have had a conversation individually. If I've gotten up and I've had 2 hours of sleep, there is absolutely no point me being in work, especially if I'm going to get a solid chunk done later in the day when I'm well rested. So we've got something that works for us. I'm able to say, listen, I'm going to have to start later today, get my rest, and I will get all of my goals achieved. That for me is how you keep it accountable as a manager, is I'll say to Hayley, I've got 3 things I want to get done by the end of the day, and I will get them done. It's not a case of, oh, you get to slack off and come in when you want. I'm still going to get it done in a time frame that works for me. And it is individualised support, and I have felt guilty about how much different treatment I might get compared to my colleagues, but I've learned, obviously through this and learned about neurodiversity, that different treatment for many people is just a reasonably adjusted management strategy to put me on a level playing field. And because I'm treated this way, I've been able to spin a lot more plates at once. I used to really struggle with coping with a day in the office. I would have a crash at the end of the day, you know, I'd try and be social, I'd try and talk to people, or I'd sit at my desk and not do anything. I'd get home and I literally, my life was rubbish. I got home from work, I went to bed. I went to work the next day, I went to bed. And sometimes I would drink on the weekends, and that was it. That was my entire life, and it was no life for anybody, really. I had no hobbies, I'd lost all my sense of fun. And I was constantly anxious that because the me I presented at work wasn't who I wanted to be, I was going to be found out. There's this thing in the back of my head, and I think it's true for a lot of people who've spent their life masking, that when you are found out, you're going to be gotten rid of. And it's pervasive, it sticks with you throughout your life. Because of the way that I've been treated, and it hasn't been an easy road, I've had my ups and downs, but I've gotten to a point where I think the way that I'm managed and the way that I give feedback works for me. I have freedom and flexibility to do my work properly, but I have the energy to eat properly. I've pretty much cut out drinking altogether, which is a really big thing. People that knew me 2 years ago, that was my crutch. It was really, you don't think that somebody maybe of my age has that crutch, but I've spent my life avoiding just how intense this all is, and I wasn't able to be me. So I didn't have any hobbies, all of this sort of stuff. I sleep better most of the time. I go to the gym as of approximately 3 weeks ago, so don't hold me to it. And I'm rediscovering my hobbies. For the first time in like 3 or 4 years, I read a book and I was really weirded out by it the next day, because I was like, I've not sat through reading a book for years. I think probably a lot of us haven't. We've all got our phones. Why do you want a book? But it used to be my hobby. I used to devour them. And I would say that my productivity is better than ever. You are free to disagree. I would say that I'm getting stuff. I mean, this event is like my baby. So the fact that it's come together and it's happened, and I haven't, died halfway through doing it, that's pretty good. I do feel more capable of thinking strategically. I was very much bogged down in the minutiae, this feeling of have to get everything right, and it was the mask. And now I feel like I'm able to take a step back. I'm not great at this. I'm really not great at this, but I'm getting better at knowing when to prioritize the strategy, when to prioritize the bits and bobs. And I have a respect for when my energy dips and spikes, and I use this to my advantage. I know that after this event, as much as it's been amazing, I'm going to need a lot of decompression time. And I'm going to respect that rather than riding on the high and crashing poorly. My point is, all it took was a workplace where I felt safe enough to say, I need help, and I trust you to follow through on your promises. I'm one of many, many people who are undiagnosed, going through a process, but I'm aware. But there are countless more who are undiagnosed and unaware. And your responsibility, please don't take this away, you don't have to diagnose them. Your responsibility is to make them feel safe. And by giving someone that safe place, you might help to change their entire life for the better. Thank you.